Thank you, David. That was tremendous. And the harmonies, you guys just keep getting better and better. I remain stunned and amazed. So thank you so much. And thank you to each and every one of you who chose to be with us today. A special thank you and a welcome to anybody who figured out the time change who isn't in Arizona and still made it here for services. We know you have choices in these virtual days, and we're delighted you chose to be with us. Today's talk title is The Joy of Creation. And I love thinking about creativity. I love doing stuff that I think of as creative. Other people might not think it's creative, like all that in a bag of chips, like some of my friends say. But they don't know how it feels to me. And I expect you have the same experience when you think about your creative adventures. And just in case you don't think of yourself as creative or as living a life that's creative that you love, or that the act of creating is something you get joy out of, I have some words for you from Rumi. Coleman Barks' translation. The title, Someone Digging in the Ground. An eye is meant to see things. The soul is here for its own joy. The head has one use, for loving a true love. Legs, to run after. Love is for vanishing into the sky. The mind, for learning what people have done or tried to do. Mysteries are not to be solved. The eye goes blind only when it wants to see why. A lover is always accused of something, but when he finds his love, whatever was lost in the looking comes back completely changed. On the way to Mecca, there are many dangers. Thieves, blowing sand, only camel's milk to drink. Still, each pilgrim kisses the black stone there with pure longing, feeling in the surface the taste of the lips he wants. Talk is like stamping new coins. They pile up while the real work is done outside by someone digging in the ground. So my question for you is, what exactly is the joy of creation for you? Is it entirely a sense of accomplishment when the task is done? Is it in the act of doing? Is it the recognition or appreciation of others when you have shown off what you've done? Each of these is a valid reason for creating, but it's important to know what it is for you, where the joy of your creation resides. I came across a TED Talk yesterday by a behavioral economist by the name of Daniel Ariely, who talked about why we do things and what motivates us to create. He's a social researcher, and he did some experiments asking people to do things, to do tasks. And he recorded what happened for them. In the first one, he asked people to build bionicles. You remember bionicles, right? The Legos that look like creatures rather than just buildings or cars. He asked people to build bionicles for money, a whole whopping $3. If people would build a bionicle for $3. After they completed the first one, he took their creation, set it aside, and asked them if they wanted to build another one for 30 cents less. Most people said yes. On average, they said yes 11 times, which meant the last one, they built it for no money at all. There was a second group. The setup was exactly the same, except as the people completed their one bionicle and agreed to start the second one, he took the previous one from them and he took it apart piece by piece by piece while they were watching. While they were building the second one, he disassembled their previous work. And if the motivation had been strictly economic, I build a bionicle, you pay me, it shouldn't have mattered. But it wasn't. They quit building after 7 times. It seems, for the first group, the potential, the possibility that their creations or constructions, even though there was nothing special about it, if there was the possibility that was somehow meaningful, they kept at it longer. He talked about a couple more experiments. One in which the subjects built origami figures. In one group, they had good instructions and it was really easy. And the origami pieces weren't anything that special. The second group had less complete instructions, so they had to work harder to make their origami figures. Which group do you think valued their work more? In the third experiment, the subjects did a kind of word search puzzle. They were faced with the same question as the folks who built the bionicles. Would they do another for less money? And another, and another, and another. When they were finished, the researcher did one of 3 things with their page, with the page that they had worked on. Either he looked at it and made an innocuous comment like, before setting it down, or he set it down without even looking at it, or he fed it to a shredder while they were watching. Which group do you imagine valued their creations more and kept doing them? As you might imagine, the paper that was looked at and commented on, even if it was a nothing comment like, was perceived as more valuable than the other 2. And in the fourth experiment, half the subjects were encouraged to put their names at the top of their paper, and the other half were not. Which group do you think took more pride in their work? Even though it wasn't really anything, it was a word search puzzle. Which group do you think took more pride in their work, regardless of what happened to the papers afterwards, regardless of how hard the task was? It's amazing how we value our creations and how we experience benefit, how we experience joy. In his conclusions, Daniel Ariely said the motivation wasn't simply economic or what other people thought of their work, but it was also related to what meaning we inferred in it, and whether we had pride of creation or pride of ownership, and whether we got some kind of joy or value out of creating, and whether or not we thought it was hard. So all of those things figure into this bizarre, amorphous definition of what brings us joy in our creation. In another place in his talk, he talked about why people climb mountains and why what they describe when they talk about their experience. And they're not talking particularly about the joy from the top. They're talking about what a pain it was to get there. So we recognize value sometimes by how hard it is, by how hard we have to strive in order to achieve. So it's just interesting to me how we see what brings us value in our creations and our activities. From this morning spiritual thought that Shelley read from The Art of Life, page 38, our whole purpose is to make the intellect an instrument for spirit. This is exactly what an artist does. We must all become artists with living. To live by inspiration means to sense the divine touch in everything, to enter into the spirit of things, to enter into the joy of living. So obviously, I'm talking about intrinsic motivation compared with motivation that comes from outside ourselves. And it's important to notice for ourselves where our motivation, where our positive feedback comes from, and what form it takes, so we can recognize it as meaningful or valuable to us. Some of you know I'm a quilter, and some of you know I'm a very slow one. In particularly busy years, I may not even get one quilt made. Some years I get 3 or 4 made, and I give away a lot of the quilts that I make. Sometimes they go to charities, so I don't even know who gets them or what they think about them. And that actually works for me in a really odd way. Last year, though, I made one for a wedding present. I thought it was the prettiest quilt I'd ever made. And it was a little different, a little unusual. And I snail mailed it to the couple that I made it for within a year of their wedding, which is pretty good for a quilter. And I never heard anything. I don't know if it got lost in the mail and they didn't actually get it, or if they got it and they didn't like it. I have no idea what happened. And I realized there wasn't any tidy way for me to ask. So I was stuck in this bizarre place of, how do I value this quilt, this thing that I made, that I gave away, that I thought was the prettiest thing I'd ever made? I had to work it out for myself in my own mind, remembering the joy I found in the act of creating, because I really did enjoy making it. And it was challenging. And I felt like it was an expression of me, of my creative potential. And I thought it was beautiful. So regardless of where it is, where it ended up, I perceive it as a valuable creation that I did. In this thing called You, page 80, Ernest Holmes wrote, "You exist, that the divine feeling, fire, imagination, and creativity may be expressed through you. The spirit comes to you with fresh, new creativity. You need not ask what others have done or how they have done it. Be yourself. Express life as you find it. Never imitate. Trust the self. Find the self in God and God in the self." In the Bhagavad Gita, one of the primary texts from Hindu scripture, there's a story of a really long conversation between Prince Arjuna and Lord Krishna. On the surface of the story, it's kind of like the song David sang, it doesn't sound like it really is okay. Arjuna's got a job to do that he really doesn't want to do. Krishna tells him it's his duty to do it. The real story is what happens to Arjuna internally, how Arjuna changes his thinking as he understands more about what karma is, what his dharma or his life's work actually is. In the second chapter, Krishna tells Arjuna, "You have the right to work, but never to the fruit of the work. You should never engage in action for the sake of the reward, nor should you long for inaction. Perform work in the world as a man established within himself, without selfish attachments, and alive in success or defeat. For yoga is perfect evenness of mind." In this particular case, Krishna is using the word yoga to express the disciplines of spiritual practice. You've heard this idea before. The practice is perfect evenness of mind. You've seen it in the writings of the Stoics. It's a central tendency, a central thought in Buddhism. It's even present in management and marketing training materials. There's a quote that's attributed to Harry Truman. He didn't say it. "It's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit." best guess, this was actually first said or written by a Jesuit priest named Father Strickland in the 1860s. And it was picked up by the Six Sigma crowd as a tenet for their success. It's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. We get to experience the joy of creation. That's one of the benefits of being incarnated as a thinking human. And we get to pay attention to why we create. What is it in each of us that specific type of activity feeds? Nobody else can decide that for you or do it for you. You have to do it for yourself. Isn't that fascinating? So I want to close with some lyrics from a moldy oldie from the New Thought singer Jimmy Buffett called It's My Job. I won't sing, I promise. In the middle of late last night, I was sitting on a curb. I didn't know what about, but I was feeling quite disturbed. A street sweeper came whistling by. He was bouncing every step. It seemed strange how good he felt. So I asked him why he swept. He said, "It's my job to be cleaning up this mess. And that's enough reason to go for me. It's my job to be better than the rest. And that makes the day for me." And then he's got a verse about a banker whose reason for living was to worry and fret, because that's what people respected in him. And then Buffett returns to talk about his own life. "I've been lazy almost all my life, writing songs and sleeping late. And any manual labor I've done was purely by mistake. If street sweepers can smile, then I've got no right to feel upset. But sometimes I still forget till the lights go on and the stage is set and the song hits home and you feel that sweat. It's my job to be different than the rest. And that's enough reason to go for me. It's my job to be better than the rest. And that makes the way for me. It's my job to be cleaning up this mess. And that's enough reason to go for me. It's my job to be better than the rest. And that makes the day for me." So what is your reason? What is your joy of creation? What is your why for the creative acts that you choose to do, whether they are artistic, or just simply the act of living well? Figure that out. Do that. Bless yourself and bless us all. Thank you. So now I want to roll straight into the prayer and think about this thing, this act of creation, this joy of living. The way spirit shows up is each and every one of us. So I rest in this space of oneness. I rest in this space of one, of love, of joy, of harmony, of peace, of living. And I know that life chooses to present itself in, through, and as each and every one here. Each and every being alive, engaged, activated by this thing called life. I celebrate this opportunity to practice. I celebrate this opportunity to explore even more of what divinity wishes to show up as me. And I know that same truth for and about every single other being. Each one gets to be that divine expression of love and order and peace and power and harmony. And to see with God eyes and to see that same freedom for each and all beings. I celebrate this ability, this opportunity to practice and know, and I celebrate each and every participant in this game of life. What a sweet way to recognize and see this opportunity and this activity of living. In joy and delight, I relax, allow, and let it be. And so it is.